Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I just wanted to showcase the private league that I'm running. This is the Recalcitrant League. It's a Metamorph Softcore Trade-Enabled league with the following mods. You can see them here in the map mods panel. So 40% more monster life, 10% increased monster damage, 20% increased monster movement, attack, and cast speed. Monsters fire 2 additional projectiles. Monsters deal 15% extra damage as each of fire, cold, and lightning. And players have negative 40% to all resists. What these combine to form is an environment where you need to focus heavily on your character's defenses, and consequently it's considerably harder to do a lot of damage. You'll notice in a sec when I fight Piety in Act 4 that the fight is going to take ages. That's because I've put a lot of effort into getting my resists to a reasonable level. And, you know, at one point they were 76, 76, 76. At the moment, they're a bit lower than that, but they're still good enough to function. So this means that there's lots of stuff going on that's crazy. Let's start this fight, and you'll get this chance to see just how mad the multiple projectiles can be on a boss that's, that scales really scarily with additional projectiles. And you'll see here that there's just not much room to dodge her attacks. Which makes her a much more dangerous fight than it otherwise would be. I'm very tanky for Act 4. In fact, at the moment, I'm considerably tankier than I normally would be when I take on Innocence on a new character. I'm experimenting with Tectonic Slam on a Juggernaut. There's a sort of optional extra challenge in this league that I'm running, where you're sort of discouraged from using meta skills. Tectonic Slam's something I've never used, so I thought, oh yeah, let's have a bit of fun trying it out. I certainly don't feel like I've got this build working well enough to recommend it yet, but it's doing enough damage to function, but it needs to do a lot more damage before I'd say it's good. So I'm needing to get the occasional extra hit in order to keep her energy shield down. Things like that start to matter in this league, because monsters are just so durable. When your damage is that low, you really don't want to have to fight through their shield again. Okay, so here she goes with her nasty attack again. Next up, of course, will be Malachi and his little pets. Not happy with where Piety is standing at the moment. Again, things that don't usually come up because the fight's usually so short. I'm not actually sure what causes her AI to move, though. Now she's actually right against a wall. That might be a worry. Anyways, that's Piety. Next up we have the various fights in the Harvest Zone, which I'll pause the video at this point and then I'll load it when I'm doing Malachi. Malachi really scales a lot with additional projectiles and with all the other mods on this map. Okay, well now we're up to Malachi, and this fight is going to be absolute mayhem as well. In fact, I expect this will be really difficult compared to the Piety fight earlier. Doedre was surprisingly nasty too. In fact, Doedre was brutal in the Harvest. So Malachi's slams, I could normally tank them on this character. There is no way that I'm going to even try and tank a slam with the extra damage mods that are present. You'll notice there that there's 5 of those instead of the usual 3. I deliberately took 1 hit. They're only small hits and they recharge my endurance charges. As a Juggernaut, ouch! Oh, nearly got slammed by that. That would have been a one-shot, I think, even with 5 endurance charges. Alright, well this side of Malachi is always the easier one. Again, it is taking quite some time to beat down these the bosses. They've got a lot. They feel like a lot more hit points. Piety has her triple balls now instead of her singles. I did notice that there's only 1 rune flare trap being thrown at a time. I sort of suspected there might have been 3, but they're not projectiles, which is useful. So top end Malachi isn't too bad. His attacks aren't doing that much damage on a very tanky build. In fact, he's easier than Doedre, but bottom end will be harder. So we're going to take Piety down at this point. A lot more hits than normal. And I'll just eat a Rune Flare Trap just to see. They're really not doing much damage at all. Okay, we've got the small RP event that can't be skipped until it can, which is usually... there it is. That's the point where you can skip it. And again, I've taken a deliberate hit there, which then ensures that I will be gaining endurance charges for a bit. Builds Tectonic Slam, so I want a constant stream of endurance charges. I want to be taking occasional hits. Really having troubles with mana at the moment. I'm not sure if that's going to continue or not. If it does continue, then I'm going to need to factor in some mana answers into the build. I'm finding even one mana flask is sometimes doesn't feel like enough. I've picked up to 50 rage at this point, which is quite useful. I've been experimenting with rage support. Normally it's not so great when you're leveling because you don't end up getting to 50 very often. And it's one of those support gems that's only really strong when you've been in a really prolonged fight. Okay, just keeping an eye on what's going on the screen with Malachi. There he is. So the key differences here, the key things that are making the fight more chaotic than usual, are the fact that I have to respect the slams. Normally a tanky build can ignore them. They can just go, oh yep, yoink, I'll take it. I believe that with the extra damage they're one-shots. The second factor is that Malachi does have his own 40% more hit points. But the big one is that I've had to build defense into the character, and so therefore fight just takes a lot longer than it otherwise would. Just going to deliberately stand in this for a little while. Eventually you get to the point that you're like, no, I'm not going to keep doing that. Run around quickly. I like clearing the Rune Flare Traps off the field occasionally. So I brace by hitting Molten Shell first, then run through them. Not so important on the Act 4 version of this, but in the red tier maps, it's very useful to just be able to have a screen that you can dodge everything on. The other thing that's really nasty is that later on, because Malachi scales quite a bit with multiple projectiles, if you get a map, a core map that has inherently multiple projectiles on it, then of course that will scale even further. Okay, so that's Malachi down. Let's give the Metamorph a shot because this is softcore and there's no real consequence for failing it. Because I've got a feeling that I may well have a lot of trouble with this. Do I want to go with currency versus rare? No, I'll go with currency there. Currency, I'm not taking Doedre's heart there if I can avoid it. Doedre was just awful, throwing 3 projectiles on a normal attack and 5 on her special one. Chevron was pretty mean as well. She fires triple projectiles. Chevron's the only difficulty I faced with Chevron was flask starvation because the fight was long. She doesn't do overwhelming damage, but she does hit a lot of times. Alright, so we've just got to dodge all of Chevron's big hits there. With the Metamorphs, flask starvation isn't really an issue unless you're massively struggling with the fight, because you'll probably be doing enough damage to the boss that you'll be spawning the ads before you run out of your flasks. There we go, that's the... let's open that stack deck, shall we? Not so great. Your skin boots, those are quite good, aren't they? Deer Stalker. Oh, it's the leveling trap skill. It's I see that as life and 15% move speed. That's better than what I'm wearing there. May even end up using that. Anyways, that's the league. That will give you a bit of a preview of what to expect. It's not absolutely chaotic and crazy yet. That comes in a bit later. The things that really go absolutely nuts are when you start running maps that have copies of these mods. So if you've got fleet and multiple projectiles together, then you get absolute insanity. But if you want to join, there's still plenty of space to join the league. Most players are still pretty low level. Very few people are through the storyline yet. There are a couple of people in the 80s at the moment, and there's starting to be a few uniques available. Because it is a trade league, you can still trade. There's just a small pool of people to trade with. Anyways, comments or questions fire away below. I will try to keep an updated link to the league sign-up page. So just go and join in that if you're interested.